Monday, the Cubs call him up. Tuesday, he plays exactly 1 inning at second base, doesn't even get a single at-bat. And by Friday, he's designated for assignment. Gone. That's the actual timeline of a Cubs roster move that just happened in the last 24 hours. And if you're sitting there thinking, wait, why would they even bother calling him up in the first place? You are asking exactly the right question, because this move says a lot more about what the Cubs front office is planning next than it does about the guy who just got cut. Before I break this whole thing down, let me ask you something a little different than usual. Not how long you've been a fan. I want to know this instead. When's the last time you actually sat down and watched a full 9 innings of Cubs baseball, start to finish, no phone, no distractions? Be honest, and tell me in the comments what city, state, or country you're watching from right now, because I want to see just how far this Wrigleyville energy actually travels. If you're one of those true diehards who still watches every single pitch, you already know this team lives and dies on moves exactly like the one we're talking about today. So if that's you, go ahead and subscribe right now, because this channel is brand new and I'm building it specifically for fans who actually pay attention to the details, not just the box score. All right, let's get into it. Here's exactly what happened. Infielder Owen Miller signed a minor league deal with the Cubs over the offseason and spent the entire season buried at AAA Iowa. Then, out of nowhere, Dansby Swanson goes down with that left oblique strain on Sunday against the Cardinals, and suddenly the Cubs need infield bodies fast. So on Monday, Miller gets the call, gets added to the active roster, finally gets his shot in a Cubs uniform. Tuesday night comes around, the Cubs are in a walk-off win over the White Sox, and Miller gets into the game, but only for one single inning at second base. No plate appearance, not one swing. And that ended up being the entirety of his Cubs career, because just days later, on Friday, the team designated him for assignment. Now here's the part that actually matters. This wasn't about Miller doing anything wrong. He didn't strike out with the bases loaded, he didn't boot a routine grounder. This was purely a numbers game, and it happened because of a completely separate move the Cubs made in the middle of the week. On Wednesday, Chicago claimed infielder Gabriel Arias off waivers from the Mets, just days after New York had designated him for assignment themselves. Arias is only 26. He's got experience at all 4 infield spots, some outfield reps too, and defensively he graded out as a clearly superior option compared to what Miller could offer at shortstop specifically. Remember, Miller has barely played shortstop in the big leagues. We're talking about 8 career innings there. Arias gives Nico Horner an actual, credible backup at short if he needs a breather, which matters a lot right now with Horner holding down that position full-time in Swanson's absence. So once Arias was added to the 40-man roster, the Cubs needed to open up multiple additional roster spots, and that's where things got busy fast. To make room for Arias in the first place, reliever Phil Maton, who's dealing with a partially torn patellar tendon in his knee, was transferred to the 60-day injured list, which realistically ends his season. Then, to officially get Arias onto the 26-man active roster and simultaneously get right-hander Daniel Palencia reinstated off the 60-day IL, the Cubs optioned Javier Assad back down to AAA Iowa and designated Owen Miller for assignment. So in the span of about 5 days, one waiver claim ended up triggering a chain reaction that touched 5 different players. That is exactly how much this front office is grinding on every single roster spot right now in the middle of a genuine playoff race, and it tells you they're not waiting around for problems to get worse before reacting. But here's the real headline underneath all of this, and it's the part I actually want you to walk away from this video thinking about. None of this, Arias included, is the Cubs' actual long-term answer at shortstop. This is a bridge, a stopgap. Because sitting quietly in the background of all these transactions is a name that matters way more going forward: Matt Shaw. Shaw has been out with a left hand and wrist injury, but he just began a rehab assignment down at AAA Iowa this week, ramping up the intensity of his hitting work. When healthy, Shaw is a real everyday piece of this infield picture, and once he's actually ready to be activated, you can bet the Cubs are going to make another move, and it's very likely Arias himself who ends up being the next man out the door, the same way Miller just was. Multiple insiders are already saying Arias probably isn't even a September roster piece once Shaw is back. So really, what we just watched with Owen Miller isn't the end of the story. It's a preview of exactly what's coming for whoever's holding that bench spot once Matt Shaw is ready to go. Let's zoom out for a second, because I think it's worth remembering just how much is stacked on this roster right now. Swanson is still expected to miss at least a month, possibly the rest of the regular season, though the hope remains he's back for October. Hoerner is manning shortstop every day. Rookie Pedro Ramirez has taken over the bulk of the second base work. Edward Cabrera is dealing with his own IL stint with a finger blister. David Peterson shifted into relief. And now you've got this constant carousel of waiver claims and DFAs at the back of the roster, all happening because the front office refuses to just sit still and hope things work out. That's 5 separate storylines running at once, all connected to that one Sunday swing from Dansby Swanson. And here's something else worth pointing out. The Cubs didn't exactly ride into this stretch on a hot streak either. They just dropped a game to Seattle, 4-5, after Corey Anderson gave up back-to-back home runs late, including a 3-run blast off the bat of Randy Arozarena that flipped the game. Ian Happ has genuinely been scuffling in August too. He's hitting just .194 for the month with a career-worst batting average on the season overall, even though he still managed to put together some pop, including a homer in that Mariners loss. So this isn't a team that's clicking on all cylinders right now. It's a talented, dangerous roster that's absorbing real injuries and real offensive slumps at the exact same time it's trying to hold position in a crowded National League field. So here's my actual take on the Owen Miller situation, and I want you to tell me if you agree or not. I don't think this is a panic move at all. I think it's actually a smart, low-risk upgrade. Think about it. Claiming Arias off waivers cost the Cubs absolutely nothing except a 40-man roster spot, and in return, they got a younger, more versatile, defensively superior fallback option at a position where they were suddenly thin. Miller was never going to be more than emergency depth anyway, and the fact that the front office was willing to cut him loose after literally one defensive inning tells you they're not sentimental about roster spots right now. Every single move is about maximizing the next 6 weeks. If you're a fan who wants to see aggression and urgency from your front office during a playoff push, this is exactly what that looks like in practice, even if it's happening at the bottom of the roster where most casual fans aren't even paying attention. Where I think it gets genuinely interesting is what happens the moment Matt Shaw is cleared to return. Because at that point, the Cubs are going to have to make yet another roster decision. And my prediction is that Arias is the one who gets squeezed out, not Hoerner, not Ramirez. Shaw slots back into that everyday infield mix. Hoerner stays at shortstop as the safest defensive option while Swanson's out, and Arias goes right back to being just insurance on the bench, or gets DFA'd himself if the Cubs need a 40-man spot for something else. It's roster churn, but it's purposeful roster churn, and honestly, that's a good sign for a team trying to make a real October run. Now, I want to hear from you directly, because I think this is genuinely a split opinion among Cubs fans. Do you trust this front office's approach of constantly cycling the bottom of the roster to squeeze out every possible defensive edge? Or does watching guys get called up and designated for assignment within days of each other make you nervous about how thin this depth chart actually is heading into September? Drop your honest take in the comments, because I want to see where the fan base actually lands on this. One more thing to keep an eye on. The Cubs just wrapped a series against Seattle and now head to Arizona to face the Diamondbacks before coming back home to Wrigley. Every single game right now carries extra weight because the margin between holding a strong wildcard position and sliding into a dogfight is razor thin in this National League field. Keep watching how Counsell uses Arias over these next few games. If he's getting real innings at shortstop to spell Hoerner, that tells you the coaching staff trusts him more than the outside noise suggests. If he's glued to the bench, that tells you this really is just a paper transaction buying time until Shaw walks back through that clubhouse door. That's everything on this one. If breaking down the actual mechanics behind these roster moves is something you want more of, not just the headlines, but the why behind every transaction, make sure you're subscribed, because I've got a lot more of this coming as the Cubs push toward the finish line. Drop your prediction on what happens once Matt Shaw is activated down in the comments, like the video if this helped you actually understand what's going on, and I'll see you in the next one. Go Cubs, go.